class. But welcome to Colin and Bob as well for doing this. And I recognize some names of people who joined us in the first session, but if you missed that first session, it is available as a recording. But also, if you are catching this on the recording, we will do our best to share the questions and comments in the chat with you, since you are not able to see those questions or comments as we go. That having been said, if you have any questions as we work through this at any time, I will be monitoring the chat very closely. So please feel free to drop those things into the chat. And this includes any but I thought this, we love those sorts of things. It's ways to engage and really have thoughtful discussion about different approaches, because one of the things Colin and Bob are going to tell you is that there isn't just one approach to many of these things. These are some strategies and approaches that they use or that they know that work. But there are other ways to approach some of these things. So please feel free to share those things in the chat. One final thing before I hand it over to Colin, I'm present as an English teacher, but I also work with a lot of writing across the curriculum. That's the course I actually teach right now at the university, is writing in the content areas. And so I'm very much about how writing reflects thinking and reasoning in all subject areas, not just in English. I could have a nice nerdy conversation about that's what English is for anyway. But that said, I will interject at certain points when we're talking about certain approaches and strategies for writing, because I like to think of writing as an instructional approach, not just something that we assign or that we do. And that's not asking you to be a writing teacher, but asking you to use writing in your classroom as we teach students to think like historians. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and navigate here. And Colin and Bob, I am at your service, gentlemen, as far as moving slides along and so on.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you, Brandon. I'm delighted to see so many people here. I saw some AP Human Geo, AP Gov, and I think an AP Art person in the list there. But I'm seeing a lot of AP World and AP US. And
I'm recognizing some AP readers there too. We got Brett Daniels from Mississippi, who I've actually been at the reading with. So it's good to have these people with us for their experience too.
Fantastic. Yeah, and if you have experience with the reading that you think is relevant to what we're discussing, please drop that in the chat, because we'd love to share that as well. So if we can go to the next slide, Brandon. Thank you. So this was we're going to share, Bob and I, different things today, different ideas, and we welcome your ideas as well and how you teach complexity. This was part of a presentation I put forward at APAC a few years ago on behalf of the College Board to all the 3 AP histories. And this was a quote from an AP chief reader, actually. Why do we have complexity? We want to encourage students to think in as complex and analytical ways as possible, to demonstrate courage in their answers. So we're going to start by going through the rubrics themselves. I think you have, this is the generic DBQ rubric, but Bob has some points he wants to make about complexity in the LEQ first, and then we'll get into some other ways of introducing that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Colin. And guys, welcome. And again, the idea here is we've got a couple of weeks right before the AP exams, or the kind of the purpose and our thought process is, what can you all take back to your classrooms and make that last run and have an opportunity to earn that complexity point? Because I hear so many times when I'm doing APSIs or when I'm even at the reading, people talk about how it's the unicorn point, and we know what it looks like, but we've never seen one, that kind of thing. And I like to believe that it's really an opportunity for students to learn that complex writing and to give them the opportunity to be able to get that point. One of the things I wanted to just touch on was, of course, just recently they increased what will add to complexity. So we can do that through the LEQ and the DBQ by having extra evidence, or by also, going the usual ways, going across themes, by doing both sides of the reasoning processes. That's one of the easiest ways that kids can do that with cause and effect. And so one of the things that I just kind of wanted to make a point of was getting those rubrics up in front of you so that you could, take a look at them again And, think about during the next 2 weeks, ways that you can incorporate those into your reviews to help students have an opportunity to step into that complex understanding and demonstrate that on the AP exam on May 9th,
And one of
for
the things,
US anyway.
one of the things, Bob, if I can interject real quickly, that I know the
Sure.
three of us have talked a lot about, but that sometimes needs to be said is we sometimes forget that the kids in front of us don't know how to think the way we know how to think. And so when it says, and I love that analysis, one of the things I love about the history rubrics is how analysis and reasoning are in the same row. Because what gets lost a lot is that in order to have effective analysis, students have to explain what they're thinking about the evidence, explain their reasoning, the reasoning behind them choosing this evidence and things. And so really I think we take for granted that kids understand that connection, and they don't. We really have to teach that explicit.
I think that's an excellent point, Brandon, because, we obviously can all do it. We're college graduates. That for us, it's like riding a bike. We may take us a minute or two to get back on the seat again, but we know how to do it. So the key is getting the kids to understand that they can do it too. And first by identifying what it is, and then giving them opportunities to do it.
Right. All right, ready to move on?
Absolutely.
Right.
So this is what I was talking about here. Some of the new ways of doing it by multiple pieces of specific and relevant evidence. So, that on an LEQ, if they get 2 pieces of evidence that they use correctly, that helps them during the evidence points. But then stepping into complexity now, if they can use more evidence. But the key, of course, is using the evidence, which means saying why it supports the claims that they're making, how that helps to develop that line of reasoning that's going to prove the argument to address the prompt. And then that sophisticated understanding of perspectives relevant to or across from, those however statements, those in addition statements, those furthermore statements that aren't just left hanging out there, but that the kid then goes into why that is also supporting or giving reference or validity to the claims that they're making.
One of the things that I've really emphasized across all AP subjects when we look at complexity is getting students to look for tension, or getting students to look for conflict, where things, come up in conflict with themselves. And this can even be ideas, where ideas are in conflict. And the most basic way, if we think about AP Gov, is to think about, say, a liberal or a conservative perspective that's up in tension. But how do students navigate that? Because if it's complex, then there's going to be multiple pieces. And I know I'm saying just 2, but there may be more than 2. But are students able to recognize and then talk about that to show that understanding?
That's using those in addition thoughts, or on the other hand, or conversely. And again, we've talked about, Brandon and I have talked about this with Colin also, that, it's not just a matter of using that word, but actually doing something with it and tying it into the point of what they're writing about to begin with.
And we see an example of that here in this sentence on the last one. While it is not necessary for this complex understanding to be woven throughout the response, it must be more than merely a phrase. So using phrases like this that help us introduce an idea, while it is not, or although, or even though, or something like that, and then lead into another idea. Did I interrupt you, Bob? I'm so sorry.
No, that was perfect. That's exactly leading into what we were talking about. So thanks, Brandon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, your next slide is all about that, Bob. Here are some of the transition words on the next slide. If we can skip down.
The DBQ, again, just going along with it, some of the new ways to take a look at the complexity and the opportunities the students have to earn it. We know that they only have to play with a certain number of documents during the document points, but the advantage of trying to use all 7 documents, trying to weave that in as evidence to support their argumentation. And if they can do that successfully, that will give them the evidence point. And then, of course, the same thing by sourcing, telling why the document it can be used to support the claims they're making, to develop their reasoning, to prove their thesis that addresses the prompt, that kind of string of thinking we need them to be able to do. But doing more sourcing than what is required. And then, of course, using the documents beyond what they were intended for. So kind of taking that further dive into the documents also. And this is in addition to the previous ways that students could do complexity. So it's just those things that we need to make them aware of so they can have an opportunity to do it. Colin, you were going to.
Yeah, your next slide gives these transition phrases that are quite useful. If we can skip ahead one slide, Brandon. Can we move to the next slide, please?
I think he may have frozen there. He made the mistake of bragging about his internet connection, and
right? No, it's not working.
The kiss of death. As soon as you say it's going to be good, so there we go. We lost. He'll come back. He got knocked out there, but you guys understand what we're talking about here. And if you have some of them, throw them into the chat. You know, some of those ways that students can use that transition phrase to demonstrate that they're taking that next step. And we've used a couple of them, those furthermores, and you know, that's kind of that nuance. I always love to talk about those old TV commercials, but wait, there's more. That's kind of that transitional idea for complexity. You know, what more can they add? So if you guys see some here, you know, that you think of that you might add to that right now, or we're waiting for our PowerPoint to come back, though we don't absolutely need that. We can work off some of y'all's too. Yeah, X, Y, absolutely, because you know, going that CC over T. I always like to stand up in front of my kids and stand on one foot. And as an old fat guy, that's kind of fun to do because I'm wiggling and I say, how strong is my stance when I'm on one foot? And they, you know, obviously they laugh. But when I put down the second foot, I have a stronger stance. So if you're going to do causation, then let's also weave into that. What are some of the effects of that? If you're going to do change, what are some things that stayed the same? If we're going to weave in some comparison, then what's different about those events or those causes or those things? And the more that they can do on those two-sided arguments, that's kind of one of the old ways to get that complex point also.
And Penny Grande has raised her hand. Let me take her off mute.
Sure.
Penny, we should be able to hear you now.
Penny? She's still muting on my side. You're looking at it.
Let's try again.
There we go. Hey, Penny, join us.
Maybe Penny didn't mean to raise her hand.
Brett threw it there. He and I have had long talks about this together when we've met before. And yeah, I mean, on the thesis statement, I have my students finish their thesis with a however line. So it's not required for the thesis, you know, they just have to have the argument that addresses the prompt, the historical defensible argument, and then 2 lines of reasoning. You know, if it's causation, two major causes. If it's, you know, change, 2 major changes. I always have them do 3 because that third one also counts towards complexity if they can do that too. But if they finish up with a however statement, you know, however, while these changes took place, this still stayed the same during the time period of da 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 da. It sets up their mind that they're going to also carry that on as a more complex way of addressing it. Penny, did you get back with us yet, or? Nope, she took her hand down, so I think we're good. Colin, did you want to look at how you share how you do that?
Sure. Yeah, I was just noticing that Tia had a good idea. CCOT is one of the, of course, 3 kind of tasks that you often get asked in a DBQ or LEQs, like cause and effect, compare and contrast, or CCOT. And the whole idea of here, Brandon's back. The whole idea of, I think it's going to start sharing again. The whole idea of having a counter argument is something I'm going to mention next in the last body paragraph. But you can actually introduce this to your students earlier in the year, but it is worth going over at this stage when you've got a few weeks left before the exam, reinforcing how you structure an LEQ or a DBQ and how you can actually begin to introduce complexity even in your thesis, right? Because you can introduce a counter argument or a split complex thesis that kind of sets up. If we can go to the next slide, actually, Brandon, here's an example of what I give to my students at the start of the year. You guys are welcome to have this or make a copy. I can email it to you.